I am so thrilled to be here to form part of this team of great speakers, this great event here at TEDxIESEBarcelona. IESE Business School is one of the top business schools in the entire world. And yet we all know that a school is only as good as the students that it produces. So could I start off by asking anybody who's an IESE student, could you just put your hand up if you feel like a top student? We got any top students in the crowd? One, two. The rest of you are feeling very, 3, 4. Okay, that's great. Good. Well, let me ask the same question in a slightly different way. Could you please put your hand up? This now goes for everybody. Could you please put your hand up if when you were a teenager, you were a top student at school? Okay. All right. Good. Cool. Fantastic. I haven't got my hand up because I was definitely not a top student at school. I was quite good at art. I enjoyed drawing. I was fairly average in maths and science. But everything else I could say was pretty bad. And allow me to define pretty bad. For instance, I studied Spanish. My final Spanish result was the lowest in the history of my school. Honestly, which I consider a personal achievement. My written English was so atrocious, according to my English teacher, that he wouldn't even allow me to sit the exam in the first place. I'm not kidding. So I think it's fairly safe to say that at school, I was a fairly average student. But then, when I turned 16, my father, bless him, he persuaded me to give up the art and to focus on maths and science at A-level. And that is when something quite remarkable happened. Suddenly, I became really intelligent. Honestly. All those facts and figures and formula, they all started to fit together. I got it. I was able to understand everything. And I felt marvelous. I had a newfound confidence. I had a new capability as a student. And I did so well at A-levels, at maths and science, that my final grades were good enough to get me into one of the top universities of the United Kingdom, St Andrews University in Scotland, to study, of all things, astrophysics. Seriously. She's laughing. Someone's laughing down here, but it's not a joke, honestly. Me, astrophysics. Because I was a top student. So then, when my first day of starting university, I walked through those doors with the confidence of somebody who was capable. I was going to have astrophysics for breakfast every day. It was going to be easy. It was going to be a walk through the park. Big mistake. No. In fact, wherever I had found my newfound intelligence at A-level, that is where I'd also left it. When I started university, I suddenly discovered that I'd come back to being an average student again. Rather than a walk through the park, 4 years at university for me was like a wading through a swamp. It was bloody hard. And my final exam results, bitterly disappointing. Now, the reason why I'm sharing this with you is not to agonize to you about my educational years, but it's to point out that nobody, absolutely nobody, not my teachers, not my tutors, not even myself, ever stopped to ask the question, why? Why is it that I went from being an average student to being a top student to being an average student again? What was the difference? And it's a pity that nobody ever asked me that question, because the answer would have really changed how I studied at university, and it could make a big difference for anybody who is trying to study anything at the moment. Because when we look at somebody who's academically capable, we usually attribute it to two factors. The first factor is that they are intelligent, they're capable, they're good at doing what they do, they have the right attitude. And the other factor is that they go to a good educational establishment, they have good teachers, they have lots of good support. Now, don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. I'm the first person to agree that there are students who are better at learning certain things than others. And I also recognize that a good teacher is worth their weight in gold. That's why IPA employs people like Cormac and Kyoko here, for instance. But the problem of focusing on these two factors is that it detracts from the third factor, which I think is equally as important, if not more so. And that is the methodology that the student is using. Or more simply put, the way that they choose to try and learn things. Because for most students equate learning to turning up for classes, making notes, and reading. And that pretty much summarizes some students' learning strategies. But I can guarantee you that there are many, many different more ways of learning, and many of them work much more effectively than listening to class, reading, and making notes. And today I would like to share with you my favorite one. And the reason why it's my favorite is because it is so amazingly simple and yet so effective. And it's so omnipresent in our lives and yet at the same time so underutilized that I seriously believe that we can call it the secret key to learning that is hidden in plain sight. What is it? Well, it's what I'm doing right now. I call it talking. And you're sat there thinking, oh, what? Did I really pay 20 years to come and listen to this? And it's like, yes, it's talking. What a lot of people fail to appreciate is the vast amount of mental effort and work that your brain has to do to take new ideas that you've just received that are in the back of your brain and to try and process them and restructure them and put them together in some sort of way that you can make coherent and intelligent conversation. It really does require a mental effort. In fact, when you see somebody trying to do it, what you're observing is real learning happening in real time. This is why you get this almost universal observation that it's the people that do the most amount of talking that are usually those that do the least amount of thinking. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah? Now, I'm tempted to refer to my mother-in-law at this point, but my wife is sat there going, no, you are not going to go there. So let's park that avenue aside and go on to a more famous example of Albert Einstein. Now, this idea that when we talk about new ideas, we learn them better, is not new. It's not new in the slightest. We've known about it for hundreds of years. Albert Einstein, for instance, himself, he used to take, you may or may not know that he had a housekeeper called Fräulein Dukas, and when he could, he would corner her, and he would insist on trying to explain to her his latest ideas on his theory of relativity. Seriously, I mean, can you imagine that? Oh, Fräulein Dukas, do you have a moment? No, I do not have a moment, Herr Einstein. I am very busy. I have things to do. I have shopping. But I have my latest theory of relativity that I would like to talk to you about. No, please, Herr Einstein. Ich bin up to here mit the space-time continuum. Find somebody else. Oh, scheiße. But I'm sure that's pretty much how it was in Einstein's household. Don't you think? But the reason why Einstein did this was not because he wanted to intimidate Fräulein Dukas. He didn't want his housekeeper to be the second person on the planet to understand the theories of relativity. He did it because Einstein realized that when you try to explain something that you're trying to understand yourself, you end up understanding it better. Now, although our academics have been aware of this for hundreds of years, it's only comparatively recently that our academic institutions have finally woken up to this and started to embrace it. Now, when I was a student, one of the universities that I would go to visit was Leicester University, where a good friend of mine was studying. And at Leicester University, they have their university library, just like any other university library. You know, big room, shelves, books, tables, students, reading, writing, sleeping. Yeah? We're all familiar with that. But a few years ago, Leicester University invested millions of pounds in redesigning their library, and now approximately one-third of the whole library is now dedicated to small meeting rooms, little conversation cubicles that they call pods. And these small soundproof rooms are there for the express purpose of providing a space where a handful of students, 3 or 4 students, can go and talk, discuss, violently argue about the points that they're trying to learn. Because Leicester University have finally realized the value of that when students discuss concepts that they're trying to learn, they end up learning them better. Now, what has all of this got to do with me becoming a top student at A level? Well, I'll tell you now, it certainly has got nothing to do with that my school even suggested the value of conversation as an educational tool. No. And it wasn't because anybody had actually communicated this information to me either. What happened was that in our school timetable, we had gaps. We had free periods where we had no classes whatsoever. And so we had a choice. We could either relax and do nothing during those times, and then in the evening have to do our homework alone at home, or we could be sneaky. And what some of us did is that we got together, we found an empty classroom, and we did our homework together. We would help each other out. It'd be like, So what's question one then? Well, question one asking is this. And how do we do that? Well, I think that if we apply this idea, we could find the answer if we would just discuss them like that. And when we were discussing the homework, we were learning it better. The irony is that I honestly thought that I was doing something bad. I was being naughty because I wasn't doing it just by myself. I was getting help from my friends. And I thought that this was a bad thing to do. And because I thought it was a bad thing to do, when I got to university, I didn't do it. During my 4 years at university, not once did I ever suggest to my colleagues that a few of us got together and spoke about the things that they were trying to learn. And how did that turn out for me? Well, you already know the answer to that. So, ladies and gentlemen, students of IPA, friends, family, if you are trying to learn something, or if you have a member of the family who's trying to learn, then encourage them to embrace the idea of having a meaningful conversation about it. It will be difficult for them. The idea of trying to put those ideas into conversation requires real mental effort, but that is where the learning is taking place. So today is all about picking up the pieces. If having a conversation about it is one of the pieces that you can pick up and include in your personal learning strategy, it will be a very good thing to do. And the greatest thing about it is that it is so simple. It's not rocket science. And yet the difference that it can make to being an okay student or a top student can truly be astronomical. Thank you.